Thanks for the introduction. I've been told to keep this as short as possible. There's a lot to go through, global overview. So let's start here. What I'll talk about is our company very, very briefly, the offshore wind market, how it's gone to date, the drivers for that offshore wind market, project challenges as we've been seeing them recently, supply chain issues, and a capacity forecast. And then what I've been asked to do is present some questions for the session, which will hopefully spur some conversation at the end of all the talks. So our company, Douglas Westwood Consulting and Research, we started in 1990. We cover most of the energy sectors, best known for oil and gas, but we have been covering offshore wind for a decade now. A range of clients from energy majors, project developers, right through to government agencies. So that's that part. A lot of this is taken from our most recent offshore wind publication, which will be coming out soon. So offshore wind market to date. So if a picture tells 1,000 words, then I'm in a bit of trouble here. But what it's saying is that this is a global market, but it's been concentrated on Europe. So capacity of over 4 gigawatts in Europe so far, and under half a gigawatt in the Asian market. So if we focus in on Northern Europe, you can see that the UK is a very, very important market. Germany looks very low now, but there's a lot of capacity which is just about to come online. So Germany will increase greatly, and quite a significant supply chain investments have been made in that market, which I'll touch on later. So moving on very quickly. So what's driving the market? Well, there's all sorts of things. We've only got 10 minutes, so let's concentrate on the European market, and let's concentrate on the European 2020 targets. So this is a binding target. So all countries within the EU 27 have to source a proportion of their final energy use from renewable sources. So you can see on this, a number of countries are some way behind where they need to be. Effectively, some countries are on, I suppose, the naughty step, so to speak. You can sort of make your judgment on which countries those are from that chart. I think it's quite clear, really. But I think the general point is that all countries are really challenged to meet that target. So it's not just a UK issue at all. So moving on. So I was going to talk very briefly about some offshore wind project challenges. So what's been happening in the offshore wind market is projects have been moving further from shore. They've been moving into higher water depths, and they've been becoming larger in scale, which is shown on that chart, hopefully. If we imagine that moving forwards, the kind of latest range we've got on there is 2018 to 2022 projects. Moving on past that kind of growth chart, that growth trend is expected to continue. Some really, really large projects past 2022. You can see that probably the water depth is kind of cooling off in that chart. I think that's about right. There is a lot of project capacity to exploit in kind of shallow, in water depths kind of under 30 meters or around there. But the industry is definitely moving forwards to look at so-called deep water projects. Okay, so very quickly, so that was on projects. So what about wind turbines? That's another key issue area. So if you look at the chart on the right-hand side there, that shows the capacity of wind turbines going into projects. A lot of these in Europe again, but you can see there's a general upward trend. There's a few of these, there's a few outliers here, which are sometimes prototypes and demonstrators at the low end, but you can generally see we're moving into an era of sort of 5 megawatt turbines, and that's what a lot of the European project developers are planning on. So as we move forward, potentially towards 7.5 megawatt and 10 megawatt turbines, you create real challenges for the supply chain underneath, especially the installation contractors with their vessels. So you can see that since 2005, when wind turbines were 3.5 megawatts in scale, which is pretty huge. That's big. That's bigger than most. Well, that's bigger than almost any onshore wind turbine you'd see. Well, they've been moving on until we're heading for 7.5 megawatt turbines in the future, with blades with rotor diameters of 150 meter, blades of 70 meters plus. Nacelle mass is very important for the vessel contractors as well. That creates real challenges for them, trying to lift something which is 300 tons plus to a hub height, potentially around 100 meters. It's these are real challenges for the vessel designers, and they obviously have to try and future-proof these vessels they're bringing into the market right now. I think what's important to say is that commercialization of these large offshore-specific wind turbines has been slower than expected. So we don't see an immediate jump to the 7.5 megawatt phase. I think 5 megawatts. There'll be a phase where those are being proven and financiers become comfortable with the risks associated with those turbines, etc. Well, that's how the market has gone so far. So I think that's a good precedent for the future. Just really quickly on the supply chain, some issues that we're seeing. I think you can split them into a number of areas. I've just picked out 3 here. So projects, the wind turbines, and the vessels, as I've touched on already. So as I said, the European project developers, which is the core of the market, planning to use 5 megawatt plus turbines in the future. Developers, I think this is a point which comes back to some issues in the supply chain previously. Developers looking for scale and performance guarantees from their installation contractors. So I think that's an issue which comes up in a number of our consultations with industry on projects. In terms of the wind turbines, as I've said, you've got some really large industrial groups now involved with wind turbines in various stages of development. That includes the likes of Samsung, Siemens, who've already got a 6 megawatt wind turbine in the water. That includes Mitsubishi, Areva, and Alstom. So these are big groups. Various views on where those turbines are in the development cycle, but some of them are really getting there. So creating competition in the market and hopefully driving down costs. In terms of vessels, as I said before, there's quite a lot of capacity coming into the market now. More than a dozen specialized wind turbine installation vessels hitting the market in the last 2 or 3 years. That's created some concern over oversupply in the market, with one major installer putting a pause on their installation, on their new build program. So I think that's something to be aware of. In terms of the installation best practice, this is more technology. There's a lot to play for there. For example, there are four distinct methods for installing wind turbines at the moment, and that the supply chain has differing views on which way to go. Whether that's installing it all in one piece or whether that's installing it kind of stick built, where you put on each component part individually. So there's all sorts of debate about that, and kind of some interesting technologies there as well, I think. Okay, wrapping up. So this is just one forecast taken out of our most recent database work. So we see the capacity. In general, there's a rising trend there. I would say UK continue to be important, Germany very important, and China has a number of projects already installed and some in the works. And we hope to see some US projects coming through, although there's been a lot of slippage in the sort of time cycles for those projects. Okay. So just to wrap up, like I said, I was asked to pose a few questions here, and I think it's probably quite relevant with the Energy Minister speaking after us. So obviously, a lot of the things we're hearing at the moment around the UK energy market reforms, the revised incentive scheme. It's a shift. There will be an interim position but eventually it will switch over to a completely new incentive scheme. A key thing there is what will the price guarantee level be there? Obviously, you know, developers are talking about that potentially ruling out some of their projects, making them economically unviable. So I think, you know, that's absolutely fundamental. And the UK is really a key global market. And, you know, I think there's a session later about reducing cost of energy. You know, how's that actually going to be achieved? You know, what are the credible routes for that? Is it increased competition in the supply chain? Is it increased reliability? Is it larger wind turbines, which would make projects more economically viable? Is it reduced cost of capital, you know, lower, i.e. through lower technical and commercial risks? And, you know, the final one, probably the most, well, I suppose, one of the more contentious ones, you know, when will UK PLC start to secure more value from these projects? There's not many studies that I'm aware of looking at the amount of local content in offshore wind farms. Actually, Douglas Westwood did one, I think, almost 10 years ago now, and that often gets quoted. So I think, you know, there's work to be done there to look at, you know, how much value we're actually securing from these projects. And so I think that's another question to take on board. And I think that is the end of my presentation. Hopefully kept to 10 minutes.
It was perfectly. Thank you, Frank. Thank you very much indeed.